Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a Star Trek news podcast presented by TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on November 9th, 2025, and is current through Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 3, so beware of spoilers. Alright, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a regular news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in the Alex Kurtzman era of Star Trek with the 12th television show currently in production and 14 movies to enjoy, and merchandise continuing to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. And today's episode, yes, I know I just put out an episode yesterday with fabulous guest Caleb Dorsch talking about the news of the week, but this is another of our interview special episodes, and today I am talking to the legendary Star Trek designer Doug Drexler. Doug has a extremely long career in Hollywood that gravitates around the Star Trek franchise, beginning with his involvement with Star Trek doing makeup for The Next Generation, moving over to the art department in Next Gen, carrying that through Deep Space Nine into Enterprise, then went on to do the Ron Moore Battlestar Galactica, then did the Orville, then came back for Star Trek Picard Season 3. Doug has this really incredible career. He started as a makeup designer, he then went into the art department, he then went into visual effects. He has an Oscar for some of his makeup work, and Doug's doing the interview rounds. You may have heard him doing interviews on other Star Trek podcasts because right now, and this is November 9th, 2025, right now there is a Kickstarter that is live for TrekStar, the Doug Drexler Documentary, which is raising money to basically make a documentary about the career of Doug Drexler and talk more about his experiences in Hollywood, a huge chunk of which is Star Trek. So we talked a lot about his career today, but I'm sure the documentary will go into a lot more detail than he and I were able to cover just in our brief time. As of the time of recording, the Kickstarter has hit $106,310 out of its $165,000 goal, and there's about 10 days left, so I think that's very doable. It needs only about $59,000 more in order to get funded. So I hope you will consider, if you enjoy this interview with Doug and you want to learn more about his life and career, heading over to Kickstarter.com, and if you just type in the search bar TrekStar or Doug Drexler, it's going to give you TrekStar, the Doug Drexler Documentary Kickstarter. I hope you will check it out, and I hope you enjoyed today's interview with Doug Drexler.
So, are we all ready?
Oh, are you doing an interview as well, Shaban?
Doug, I'd love to start by just talking a little bit about your Star Trek fan origin story. I want to go even further back than the Federation Trading Post, because I have a bunch of questions about the Trading Post I want to ask, because I'm fascinated by fandom in the mid-70s. But like you are a Star Trek fan who... There are people who worked on Star Trek who became fans of Star Trek because they worked on it. And then there are people who worked on Star Trek because they were fans of Star Trek, and you fall into that latter category. So where did it start? I mean, I know you grew up in the New York area, so is it WPIX, TOS reruns that were the thing that got you in?
No, I'm old enough to have watched it first run on NBC.
Uh-huh.
And I watched the entire first season in black and white.
Oh, wow.
The thing, though, that you got to remember about me, though, was that my love of science fiction came from reading science fiction. There wasn't much on TV, and there weren't even a lot of movies. It was considered, kid stuff at the time. So there wasn't a lot of it. And if you were into it, you were, you were brain damaged or something. Really, you were treated. I was abused in school because I liked it, But when I saw Star Trek, Twilight Zone, of course, was fantastic, and The Old Outer Limits I liked. But when it came to this sort of thing, it usually, I'm very nostalgic about Lost in Space, but I know it's goofy kid stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a place for that, and I'm very fond of it. And Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea is another one where actually, even as a kid, I knew it was goofy. I mean, and I guess I was 11. And that submarine was just, that was out of this world. I loved the sub. And they had great actors too. But anyway, when I saw Star Trek, it was, space opera, but it was so obvious that whoever was making the show was actually a fan of science fiction.
Yeah.
Brought in writers who I had read as a kid. Because I read Theodore Sturgeon and, Harlan Ellison. And to me, that was so impressive that they did episodes. So that's where it started for me. I mean, I missed the first few episodes when it aired. I just wrote something about this recently, that back then, there were only 3 networks, and they were making money hand over fist. It's not like today where that pie is cut so incredibly thin.
Yeah.
To even make a show is, the networks every fall in September, two big things happened. One was all the flashy new cars came out of Detroit. I wasn't a car head, but I was still interested in the designs. And the networks had 1 week where they all at the same time, all 3 at the same time, had a competition. And they aired all their new premiere episodes that week. And also color was coming in. Not everybody was color. NBC was the full color network, but other shows were. So I got hooked on the show from that. I wasn't allowed to watch television during the week, actually. I was only allowed to watch television on the weekends. And then when I saw Star Trek happening, I had to hear about it from some of my friends. And pictures were so intriguing. And that ship, oh my God, that was like nothing else. Nothing else. Still, it's like nothing else.
Yeah.
And my mother took a shower one evening, and it was a Thursday night at around, 7:30 or 8. And this was my chance to sneak down and turn on the TV to get a look at Star Trek. And back then you had to warm a TV up, and there were all these tubes on the inside, these glass tubes with all these plasma filaments glowing and stuff, I grew up in a TV repair store. I used to love to open the back of a TV and look at all that, like alien technology. But anyway, that was it. After I saw about 15 minutes of it. And then my mother turned the shower off. I knew I had to run away.
Yeah.
But I went on strike basically for 1 hour of television a week. So you can imagine what an important thing it's been to me, that magic 1 hour that I would count down to every week. Get up Tuesday and go, oh my God, it's going to be on Thursday. And the show had this crazy effect on me. I after an episode, I'd sit there just in deep thought. It was like I was in an alpha state, and that was it, man. I mean,
yeah.
I was completely hooked. And also, it was an underdog show, and you feel special. You think the show's great. No one else gets it. No one in school, only a couple of people in school got it.
Yeah.
And as far as mainstream media goes, it was, they called Mr. Spock Dr. Spock. Leonard Nimoy would be on a talk show and they'd introduce him as Leonard Nimoy, who plays Dr. Spock, because of back then it was a famous baby doctor named Dr. Spock.
Right.
But that's how I got started. That was it.
And I feel like there are 2 types of ways that people express their fandom. You have fans who are perfectly content, passively receiving the thing that they're a fan of. They sit and they watch, or they read and they process, and like that's it for them. That's good enough. That's how they enjoy the thing. But then there are fans who express their fandom by doing, by getting involved in the thing, by writing fan fiction, by building models.
I challenge you. What other mainstream show has that effect on people? not Boston Legal,
No.
not MASH,
Right.
none of them.
Yeah.
But Star Trek gets you building and drawing and sculpting and
Right.
painting, and it's amazing. Well, I mean, it did it to me. The one thing I should have mentioned was the real thing that kicked it off for me, learning and getting involved, was Stephen E. Whitfield, Stephen Poe's
Yeah.
making Star Trek.
Right.
I mean, I read that. I guess I was 12 or so, and it like blew me away, because what I was reading about in the book was better than the adventures of the Starship Enterprise.
Yeah.
This whole realization. And of course, Majel Roddenberry had a hand in it too, because she's based on the show's fan letter. They keep a list of who wrote. I got a thing from, I don't know if it was called Lincoln Enterprises yet. It was like a 8.5 by 11 letter sheet with 3 columns with stuff you could get directly from Star Trek. Badges, scripts, slides, not copies of slides. Majel was going and getting all the discards off the editorial floor, and they were snipping them up and putting them in envelopes. So to be able to get actual scripts and slides where you saw a guy with a clapboard,
Yeah.
or a very ordinary person with glasses and, taking notes with a stopwatch. You're like, what the hell is going on here? And just knowing that the frame of your television is just where the good stuff begins as you get past that.
Right.
Yeah, I love the show and I love the actors and all that stuff. But what was happening to make the show really grabbed me. First, it was the adventures and stuff that grabbed me. And then it was, how do they make this show? And so I was reading call sheets, looking at Fred Phillips doing makeup, props. It was a revelation.
And what role does the Federation Trading Post play in this? So at some point you're a Star Trek fan, and then you decide, I want to go to Hollywood and kind of do this thing. When does the Trading Post fall into that timeline in terms of, had you decided you wanted to do that before you took that job, or was that a thing that came from getting deeper into
Everybody has a crazy dream about, maybe I could work in the movies. Look,
Sure.
I love watching TV. What could be so hard about that? Look, it looks like you're just having fun. Which you are, but it can be pretty scary sometimes. Federation Trading Post was 10 years after the original series aired.
Yeah.
And we were starting to get reruns in New York. I think you said WPIX was like running it 5 nights a week. And it was slowly building up steam, the fan community. And this was really that era from like 1970 through to the 80s. The fans owned Star Trek. The studio was doing nothing with it. There was an animated show for a little bit there. But as far as toys, they were mostly ridiculous. Spock helmet with a light on top, which I wish I had one now.
Sure.
I wish I had one now. But I hated it when it first came out as a kid. It so offended me, like Spock would ever wear that. So I was living in Manhattan in the Village, and a friend of mine got me a job at this company that was like an armed response, private police thing for alarms. Alarm goes down, 2 guys go over, one's armed, and that there was some adventures there. But every night at like 10 o'clock at night, the old Outer Limits would rerun on maybe it was WNEW, Channel 5 or something like that. And so I would get off like 9:45, and I would race back to my apartment to watch the Outer Limits. And then one night there was like a single frame ad that lasted about 15 seconds saying, Federation Trading Post, the only Star Trek store in the galaxy, opening blah, 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 blah. And it was like that sound of a phonograph needle ripping across vinyl.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? What the hell is that?
Yeah.
And, oh, look, it's only 2 blocks from where I report to work. So I went down there, and it was 53rd and 3rd, which is pretty prime. It's not like being hidden down in a village, where they
Sure.
had Forbidden Planet much later.
Yep.
This was like right out there, Midtown, right across from the City-Corps building, really. And it was a 2-story walk up. You walked up from the outside. You could see the front of the store on the second floor above a restaurant. And there was a big plate glass window that had their logo of Spock giving the Vulcan salute. And I thought it was a nice graphic. It still is. And I went up there and I could see some guy painting, a guy with a bushy hair and a mustache. And he saw me and he came over it. Now, this is where the thing where it's starting to dawn on you that there's this connection that you have with fellow fans. You meet them, and because of this, Denise Okuda called it shared childhood, that instantly, it's like, I've known you for 10 years. And you start talking about how how good the show is and the impact. And before you know it, he's like, do you want a job? I'm like, holy cow, do I want a job? And I gave the alarm company 2 weeks notice. And I started with the Federation Trading Post, which it was in the beginning being run by Ron Barlow, who was a guy who did he was very much into comic book reprints and the old EC comics. And he was my kind of guy, And also he had like real world experience, modest, really. But at the time, it didn't seem modest to me. And he worked for magazines like the Monster Times and stuff like that. Monster Times, oh my God. So he and I became great friends. And before you knew it, I had all my friends working there. And we had ideas and plans. We built a museum in there, and there wasn't a lot to sell, so we made stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was really curious, right? Like, as you were just saying, right, the Spock helmet is the prime, this is a little later than that, but still, even by the late 70s, it's a few Mego figures, it's a few this, it's a few that. Like how do you sustain a store in that kind of environment?
Yeah, there was the AMT kits.
Yeah.
There was the Mego stuff. And there were a couple of, there was a Spock poster holding the 3-footer. That was a smash. There were 3 posters that went through the roof. It was Raquel Welch in a fur bikini from, 10 million years BC or whatever that Ray Harryhausen did, where he discovered her. There was Steve McQueen on a motorcycle from The Great Escape, and it was Leonard Nimoy in color. The other 2 were black and white. Someone had a brilliant idea to make a poster out of that. And plus, posters back then were very unusual. You get all kinds of posters now.
Yeah. But
back then, it was like, really a giant photographic, print for probably it was only $1 at the time. So we had all of that stuff. But we had, especially with a friend of ours, a guy named Alan Asherman, was one of the first people who was a documentarian of the show and wrote articles. First article I ever read was written by Alan Asherman, and he was so enthralled. And it was in a magazine called, there were monster magazines. Like Forrest J. Ackerman had his famous Monsters of Filmland. And there was this one magazine called Castle of Frankenstein. And it had Leonard Nimoy as Spock, full face. And I'd never seen a picture like that, with a 4-page article about the show. And it was Alan. And Alan lived in New York, and he ended up being one of the people in the circle there. And he had an amazing collection of original studio film negatives and just tons of stuff. As a matter of fact, when we built the museum, he had one of McCoy's medical tunics. He had a wraparound, Kirk's wraparound. And he also had a couple of props like phaser, communicator. And we had friends who built stuff. So, we had a full-size Nomad. I still have it.
Uh-huh.
It's here in my house. It's like 50 years old. So getting back to stuff that we sold, we made posters. We printed posters. We had uniforms made. the uniforms on Saturday Night Live with John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd came from us.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Man Magazine would come to us. Toy manufacturers would bring their toys to us for us to look at and give notes on. Pocketbooks. I guess it was, who was publishing it then? I don't remember. Simon & Schuster, was it?
Simon & Schuster started in 1979 with the motion picture novelization. Before that, it was Bantam Books.
Bantam. Alan Asherman did the Star Trek Compendium, I guess it was called.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which we got him that job because some guy came in, some guy did a book that was so wrong. And we told him, fans will hate this. And they said, well, we have to publish a book. Do you know anybody? And we said, yeah. And we gave him Alan's, he did that book. But we had slide sets. We had like 100 different pictures, 8x10s on the walls. We had blueprints. Of course, there were the Franz Josef blueprints, but we like to draw too, and it was me and Anthony Frederickson and Jeff Mandel who all ended up working on the show, doing blueprints that we sold in the store. But one of the other things that we did that I was really proud of was that we became a place where you could go and find fanzines.
Yeah.
Fanzines. There was no internet yet. So for fans to exchange pictures and stories and drawings, you printed them like mimeograph. Remember mimeograph? The smell of a mimeograph machine still sends me into shock because when I was in school, that's how they printed the tests in the principal's office. You could smell it. It was kind of vinegar kind of smell. You knew there was going to be a test. What was I saying?
Fanzines.
Oh, yeah. So fanzines. So you go to a convention, and one of the things conventions used to have, they don't have anymore, was a big room with bunches of tables with fanzines, home printed, mimeographed. Xerox was still, out of reach for most people, with stories and art. And, me and Anthony and Jeff did art for fanzines. You can still find stuff out there today. And it was a whole creative facet. Of course, it's still going on, but it's on the internet. It's what was interesting about people who did fanzines is that you didn't have to just want to write and draw. You had to have the compulsion to figure out how to get it printed. And then you'd have people, you have subscriptions and stuff. It was amazing. And the really interesting thing about it was that 90% of them were women who were doing these fanzines. And I had read an article years later in the New York Times about an influx of female writers writing science fiction, which was usually a male-dominated genre. You had all these women who were coming in, and they traced it directly back to Star Trek fanzines. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So we had a wall full of fanzines where we had them on consignment. Of course, there were also those great pictures of Kirk and Spock, 6-foot high poster, and it was in black and white. We had those. People would come in there and just recharge.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It almost sounds like the way you describe it, it's like, yes, it's a store and you're selling stuff, but it's also just a place where, like, in an internetless world where, to your point, right, like, we're not too far beyond that moment in time when you're in school and sci-fi is this like completely verboten thing that's very, like not part of the mainstream, that like having a place like this where you could go, where you immediately walk through the door and you're like, everybody here likes the same thing that I like, that it's like a place of community.
I mentioned when, I saw Chuck working in the store painting, Chuck Weiss, who they had a small store in Berkeley, California.
Yeah.
Somehow they got the crazy idea to do it in New York, and we were just the guys to do it for them, that shared childhood thing where you just meet people you never saw before, and it's off to the races, and you're just having fun talking. The Federation was a great place to hang out. And it was the center of, and the funny thing is that we're not hiding. Paramount just didn't care.
Right.
Star Trek didn't mean money to them at the time.
Yeah.
And so we were on 53rd and 3rd. You cannot miss us. And plus we did press parties and stuff where we invited all the newspapers and television, because if you're in Manhattan, you're just a few blocks away from everything.
Sure.
And they would come down. I invited Stan Lee when we opened our museum, and he showed up. And he was awesome. Oh, my God, that guy is everything you want. He really is. You just love the guy. Love him. Did you ever hear that story about when he came to the Federation?
No, tell me.
Well, when I was a kid, comic books were really bad for you. And they created mass murderers and drug addicts.
The comics code or whatever.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
It was, your parents would feel like, not good parents if they let you have comic books. So, my mother made me throw away all my comic books. It was like a dagger in the heart. And so I invited her to the opening in the museum, and she was there, and Stan came in. And I introduced Mom, I want you to meet Stan Lee. And she says, she actually puts a finger in his face like this. She says, I want you to know that you had more to do with raising my son than I did. Stan said, the last woman who told me that, her son was in Sing Sing. And it was the funniest damn moment. So anyway, years and years later, out here in LA, maybe it was 10 years ago, Barbara Luna was doing, Barbara Luna?
Yeah.
The amazing Barbara Luna was doing a autograph show down at LAX. And she said, Stan Lee's going to be there. You should come over. And so I did. And he was in the green room, not out in the, in the public, was in it. And he was just going like a bat out of hell, signing posters for people and stuff, who were in the room with him. And and he was great. I mean, me and Dorothy and Jimmy and Luna talking to him. We took some pictures with him. He's just always wonderful, always. And after that, I said, Stan, I just wanted to let you know, and I'm sure you've heard this many times before, but you were my surrogate father. You're my surrogate dad, honestly. And I told him the story about the Federation Trading Post with my mother.
Yeah.
And he burst out laughing because he tells a good joke and he knows a good joke. And it was hilarious. So after that, you tend to circulate around a little bit. About an hour had gone by and Stan's handler comes in and says, Stan, we have to get you to the airport. And he goes, he waves at everyone and heads to the door. And I'm thinking, should I say something to him? I go, he's like in his 90s.
Yeah.
He's just spoke to 100 different people. He's not going to remember me. But just, and when he got to the door, he went for the doorknob and stopped, turned around, looked around, found me and said, goodbye, my surrogate son. So it was just like a perfect full circle thing that I'll never forget as long as I live,
Yeah. So how do you go from being co-manager of a Star Trek merchandise store at 53rd and 3rd to winning an Oscar for makeup?
That's crazy, really. It's even crazier to end up working on Star Trek.
Right.
In so many positions. That's totally nuts. But well, after the Federation, I ended up moving away.
I would love to hear as you tell this story, like how much of this is ultimately, like how much are you the kid who's with the big ambition to work on Star Trek versus, well, you're just going to try this and see where it goes. And if it ends up in Star Trek, that like, was that what you wanted when you went out there?
My dream was always to work on Star Trek. But the thing was that there was
when's that going to happen, right?
Was going to come back.
Yeah, right. It's done.
Star Wars happened.
You want to work on Star Trek, build a time machine.
Yeah, Star Trek's done.
Right.
Then they did the movie while we were. It may have been after the Federation Trading Post. They had started it while I was at the Trading Post.
Yeah.
All I know is that while they were making a movie, Jeff Mandel and I both ended up working on the show. We flew out to California while they were making the first movie with the plans of just sneaking on the back lot. That was our only plan. The only reason we came out was to find a way on the back lot and catch a glimpse of Star Trek. And we managed to get an interview with Lee Cole in the art department. She was a graphic designer on the show, who I'd end up working with her on Enterprise. She was on Enterprise. And we also got an invite to Howard Anderson, who was on the back lot there. And that's how we got on the back lot. And we spent the whole day there, you know. We went to Howard Anderson, and there was even though it was about 10 years later, a little more than 10 years later, there still was a rough sketch of the lithium cracking station from Where No Man Has Gone Before on the wall.
Wow. Yeah.
I should have stole that.
Yeah.
Probably got thrown away.
Yeah.
You know. So, but we went up to the art department, and the production designer was Harold Michelson, who really figured powerfully in my career later on. He was a conceptual artist and matte painter on Dick Tracy. That's where I really got to know him. But he was a production designer, Star Trek: The Motion Picture. He wasn't there when we were up there, and but one of the great things was that, well, Lee Cole wrote a recommendation for me, like right away, instantly, which was like amazing to me. When we worked in Enterprise, God knows how many years later, I brought the letter in. I kept it. And she was like, what? Well, on the wall in the art department, I had a letter from Bob Justman when I was first communicating with him, and he couldn't believe that I had that on the wall. So Mike, we were in this Star Trek: The Motion Picture art department, and Mike Miner came in. Now, Mike Miner was a guy that I knew a lot about, never met him before. He was a good friend of Bob Burns. Remember Bob Burns?
Yeah.
Monster Kid. Mike had even done some stuff for the original series, and he loved the show. He loved Star Trek, and he was working on Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and he came in, and right away he knew that we were like part of his tribe. And after that, he took us around and showed us a few things, So that was our first taste of Hollywood, really. I mean, sneaking on a back lot is pretty gutsy.
I mean, what a first taste.
Crazy. So that was amazing. Of course, I went to the world premiere of the first movie. It was at it was in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. I used to live just up the street from the theater. Yeah.
It was theater. I think it's a drugstore now.
Yeah. It was still a theater for many years, but not anymore.
Yeah. And so that was my first time really rubbing elbows with, Nimoy was there, Shatner was there, Roddenberry was there, Robert Wise was there. I sat in front of Jerry Goldsmith. How did I get a better seat than Jerry Goldsmith? I ask you, how did that happen? I will mention, though, that his wife coughed through the whole movie. Someone's going to ruin your soundtrack. I guess it's,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Let it be
Yeah,
your
she's
wife.
the only person allowed.
And then after, I knew the movie was going to get a lot of ridicule. I mean, it is kind of ponderous.
Yeah.
In the same way that 2001 is.
Sure.
I mean, I love 2001, and I love Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and it's really the most unique of all the movies.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's, it's trying to be 2001 in some ways. I don't think it's imitating it. It's still doing its own thing. Star Trek, that's the beauty of it. It does its own thing.
Yeah.
Ships aren't covered with nernies.
Right.
It's still sleek and look aerodynamic, which is amazing that they stuck to their guns on that,
Yeah. Especially since Star Wars and the phenomenon of it would have put a lot of pressure on them to move in a direction that would just make it look like Star Wars.
Yeah. Well, I find that even today, though, there are people who work in art departments and some of the newer shows and visual effects departments who are not Star Trek people. And I'm sorry, but there are Star Trek people and there are Star Wars people. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Star Wars people think Star Trek should be more like Star Wars.
Yeah.
J.J. Abrams is not a Star Trek fan. He admits it. He's a Star Wars fan. And so what he did to Star Trek is what, a Star Wars fan who believes in himself right to the core about what Star Trek should be. They weren't dumb to get J.J. Abrams. I mean, he was a hot commodity.
Right.
So, trying to call me here. Where's Luna? It's Luna, Barbara Luna. Yes, Barbara Luna texts me. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
She was always my favorite Star Trek babe, my very favorite one. I thought she was so beautiful and exotic. And then we've been like best friends for the last 20 years. And She's just awesome fun. It's really unusual to find a gorgeous woman who's silly. I find that people tend to be, if you're really beautiful, you don't need to be silly. You don't need to be anything. You can be nothing if you want, and people will still flock to you. But if you're kind of ordinary, you might draw attention to yourself by being silly. She had no reason to become silly, yet she is. And it's like absolutely amazing.
Did you ever find yourself like, I mean, I can imagine, right? Like, you go back to being a kid, or you go back to being, the age you were when you were working at the Federation Trading Post, and then you go forward 10, 15, 20 years, and you're on texting basis with Star Trek actors, series leads, from the show that you idolized as a kid to the shows that you worked on. Like, does it ever become, I mean, it's a job, right? And jobs have things that you like about them and things that you don't like about them, and you have good days and bad days. But for you, did it ever feel like, did it ever become routine? Did it ever be like, or are you just the whole way through just being like, I'm the kid who loves Star Trek and works on Star Trek?
Yeah, that's the way it's been.
Yeah.
And I can tell you it was that way for Mike and Denise too. If you are really, I don't know what it is about the show that can grab people, but it has just remained exciting to me all through my life.
Yeah.
I thought I would outgrow it. I go, oh, as I get to be an adult, I'm sure that, because all the adults told me. And it just never did. It actually accelerated, and I became involved.
Did you ever consider, during the period, let's say, between Next Generation and the end of Enterprise, obviously the end of Enterprise, sort of forced everybody off the show. Did you ever consider during that 18-year run going and doing something else that wasn't Star Trek? Or was it just like, this is where I want to be? There's nowhere else where I want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't want to be anywhere else.
Yeah.
And I'd been on the show in a number of different capacities, although probably longest in art department.
Yeah.
I love the art department. Art department touches everything, even the visual effects,
right.
And I've done visual effects. I was CG supervisor on Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
And, everybody, James Olmos one with Gary Hutzel. But on the show, I was a conceptual illustrator, graphic designer, makeup artist. It's kind of crazy. The beauty of Star Trek, I have to say that I like to say that Star Trek is the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
It just has, I was there for it in the beginning. I was part of saving it, and, in season 2, and it's just always stuck by me. I'm not working on any of the new shows, which I would. I had a great time on Picard.
Yeah.
But that was a totally different environment than any of the others of the new shows.
Right.
Because I'm a continuity guy. I look at it like history. I don't look at it like something that we can remold. I could see cleaning it up and sleeking it a little bit. But when the new shows happened, they were pretty determined not to have, OG people, working on the show, because they wanted to feel free to do their own thing. To them, the Star Trek Encyclopedia was a nemesis. It kept them from doing whatever they wanted.
Right.
The writers, a lot of ideas for stories came out of the encyclopedia and the tech manuals. But at the same time, I'm sure there's times the writers wish there wasn't one.
Yeah.
Gene Roddenberry himself asked Mike and Denise to do the encyclopedia because he wanted to keep the facts straight. He understood how important that was. When the shows start going in different directions, even between shows, if you have more than one, they're not staying, the continuity isn't, and they're certainly not trying to stick with the, Roddenberry era of shows. To them, they see that as something that needs to be fixed. Yeah, you can fix it, but you have to treat it. I don't know how many times I said this. If you're going to do Pearl Harbor, you don't give the Japanese jet planes because they're cooler.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a historical drama. So is Star Trek. Star Wars is not. I mean, it's not even us. It's like it's a galaxy way, way somewhere else, you know. That's what was always appealing about Star Trek to me, that it was a projection of where we would be.
Yeah.
And the other beauty is when it comes to the ships, the difference between Star Trek ships, say Star Wars ships, all Federation starships, it's like if you were doing a movie with a B-17. You don't do something that's roughly in the same shape and detail it in a way that you think is maybe cooler. You look at what it actually was. And then you could build off of that a little bit to clean it up or sleek it up or whatever. But it has to be treated just the same as a historical drama.
Yeah.
It has to. Otherwise,
I'm curious though, within the context of like let's say within the context of that Berman era of Star Trek, you know, even in there are still times when budget or effects not being ready or things like that get in the way of that. And the one that immediately pops into my mind is season 1 of Enterprise. The first Klingon ship you see in Unexpected is a Katinga class battle cruiser from the TOS movies, because you guys had put together a concept design, but it wasn't ready to go. They needed a model to drop in, and like they just put a later ship in, and at the time, you know, the episode comes out and everybody's up in arms about, you know, this Klingon design from much further in the future.
it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah,
Have you
oh,
seen
sure.
Klingon ships on Discovery? Have you
Right,
seen the
sure,
Klingon on
absolutely,
Discovery?
no, totally. But I guess I'm curious to explore within the context of how you feel. Like, there's you as the fan who's like, this is not how it's supposed to be, and then there's you as the professional who's like, yes, but this set of constraints means we have to do it this way. Like, I'm curious, like as you came across moments like that during that 18-year period. And I'm not saying this is sort of like this is not presented as a defense of the way that your points about the modern shows are very well taken in the way that they're presenting it. But like that historical drama piece, it's like I'm sure there were moments in your career when you were working on it where there was that tension between how sort of keeping the like extreme realism versus, you know.
Did we really use a Katinga in Enterprise?
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, John Eves had done a design for a D4 class battle cruiser, but I don't know if it was because of money or because of time, or there was just some kind of mistake, but like it didn't end up making it to screen. What made it to screen was one of the digital models created for Voyager. It was the same digital model they used for Prophecy, the last season of Voyager.
Yeah, well, you know, you never know. I was not involved with that part of it, and I can't remember at this point. How many years has it been?
Yeah, but I mean, that's just an example of like these moments where things happen where what makes it to screen is not what in your heart of hearts as a fan you would go, that's not what I would do or how I would have done it. But because of like these production realities, these things happen. Like I would imagine in the course of you working on this stuff, you did have those moments where there was like a bit of an internal war between the guy who helped run the Federation trading post and the guy who's got to do this with $5,000 and, you know, like very little time and budget. And like, so how do you like, because it's sort of that moment where the thing you love becomes the thing you work on. And like, how did you find yourself moving through those moments?
You know, there are some people who can't deal with that.
Yeah.
And we call them divas. You know, when you work in this business, you know, you're working for the producer, the director, you know, hopefully you get someone who will listen to your input, or it could be a money issue, you know, and that's all there is to it. You know, you do what you can in the situation that you're in, you know. I've always been really good at being able to put things aside and get on with it. You know, my number one job is to work for them. If you act like you're in charge, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. And probably not last very long on the show. I mean, Picard season 3 was the best return to Star Trek I could have hoped for, because I know now that if I had been brought on Discovery, which I almost was, or some of the other shows, which I almost was, and that's a whole nother story, I would have had to have done things that I didn't like. you know. But going back to work with Terry and Dave Glass, two guys who are Star Trek geeks, and who considered people like me and Mike and Denise, and you guys wrote the book. We need you here. That's like, so I found that when I was working on ships for Terry and Dave, they were almost more concerned about what I thought than what their opinion was. Terry was often, like, well, Doug, what do you think? Because it's really important to me that you approve of what we're doing. Holy mackerel. That's insane.
Yeah.
How often does that happen? Almost never. So it really worked out. I think it might have broken my heart if I had to work on Discovery.
Because you would have been a company guy, you would have sucked it up and done the work that you were told.
I have to do what they said.
Yeah.
But
it would have hurt to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I was on Orville for season 3.
Yeah.
And that was a great experience for me. I thought it was a really good experience.
Yeah.
Stephen Lineweaver and Robert Strohmeyer, their production designer, art director, they're not Star Trek geeks.
Yeah.
Like Dave Glass is, but they're good designers, and they understand what Seth MacFarlane wants,
Yeah.
And so I enjoyed working for them. I never thought that they were unreasonable, when I was working, with them and Seth and stuff. I always thought if Seth had a very strong opinion about the direction this should go in, and he's not seeing it in what I have here, which actually didn't really happen that much. I mean, I did a number of things that he through the roof loved. And of course I did, like I redesigned the back of the bridge on the Orville. In the first 2 years, I think it was just like a carpet on the wall. And I looked at the show and I was like, oh my God, what I could do with that wall. And it was one of the first assignments they gave me. And it came out stupendous. And I got we tried a couple of different approaches that Stephen was thinking about that didn't get approved. And finally, Stephen came to me and said, you know what, do what you think is right.
Yeah. And
so I did a bunch of versions of the back of the bridge, and it looks awesome back there now. It looks believable, like it actually functions, Another big one was the hangar deck floor on the Orville. The first 2 seasons, I looked at that graphic and I'm like, this graphic should be telling me a story. I don't know what it's saying. It's just a bunch of science fiction markings, to me anyway.
Yeah.
And I think you got to be a real geek about this stuff to know the difference, and the next thing I knew, they were asking me to restyle the floor.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I wanted to do. And you look at that hangar floor in season 3 and it tells a story. You could figure out what's going on there. It looks functional. What a thrill it was to do that. So
do you remember the first thing that you did on Star Trek where when you then watched the episode, you were like, that was me, I did that. That's my first contribution to this?
Well, I guess makeup.
Yeah.
It had to be makeup.
Do you remember what it was in the art department?
Well, in makeup, the thing that I really remember, and it probably wasn't the first thing I did. I may have done background Klingons or Borg or something like that. But when I did Patrick Stewart up for a holodeck sequence with Data doing Shakespeare, and Picard plays one of the kings.
Sure. Yeah. In the Defector.
Yeah. So to get to put a makeup on Patrick Stewart, but you also have to remember I came from Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
That was the biggest show in town. It was a huge, huge show. And I was working for Warren Beatty, who was, he was a Hollywood figurehead, a very powerful guy in Hollywood. So when I came to Star Trek, I was treated like a king, Mike Westmore was like, well, what do you want to be on Star Trek for? You could be out there doing features. And I'm like, no. Oh, it's always been about Star Trek.
Yeah.
So, and that, as a matter of fact, I used to sometimes geek out on stage. And I know that you're not supposed to be a geek on stage because they're not, if you're too much of a geeky fan, they're concerned about you because they've had so many people break into the stages.
Yeah.
and take things and
Greg Stone or whatever his name
Greg
was.
Stone, yeah, he's the most famous
Sure,
one. I'm sure he's proud of himself.
Well, and the Enterprise D captain's chair that just showed up at auction last year, had been gone since All Good Things.
Alley on the Paramount backlot, it disappeared.
Right.
So, but I can get away with being a geek because I just got done working with Warren Beatty.
Yeah, right, yeah, right.
So I actually was a geek quite often.
Yeah.
I met Mike Okuda on stage for the first time I knew who he was. I thought the work was amazing. And being a makeup artist and being able to put my nose right up against the plexi and look at everything and go, oh my God, this guy is not kidding around. He's figured this out. This isn't just science fiction here. He's doing conceptual, experiments of the future, well, that's the difference between a Star Trek ship, which I was getting at before, and say a Star Wars ship.
Right.
If you're doing a Starfleet starship, there's certain things every fan expects to see on it, just like you do on airplanes today. And if they're not there, if there isn't a warp core egress, if there isn't reaction control thrusters, if they don't have the airlocks in the right place, if there isn't a warp core egress port, stuff like that, that if you don't understand the technology and the science of it, you're going to miss when you do your starship. The best Star Trek starships are the ones where you could look at them and take them apart and the fans know what's where.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that in other shows. With Star Trek, on one hand, and not on Star Trek, on other shows, you're doing science fiction designs. On Star Trek, you're doing aircraft logic challenges. You're trying to conceptualize what things might look in 200 years. You're not just doing science fiction. You're reading up. You understand the science. You know what's come before. And so when fans see the show, and I remember that fans are having a lot of problems with the ships in the new shows. Sometimes they'd rubber stamp 100 ships that are the same in a scene and think no one would notice. Of course, we reuse stuff like crazy for good reason.
Yeah.
In the original series, I like seeing the Excelsior and Next Generation. I like that. I think starships should last 100 years.
Yeah.
But with Star Trek, you're doing aircraft logic designs, and it's a totally different thing. They have a different feel. And when we did the first ship that I was involved with in Picard that was seen was in the beginning of season 2, where you see the Stargazer for the first time.
Yeah, great ship.
A long, loving, beautiful shot looking down on it. And I remember people on the internet saying, wow, we haven't seen this since the last group of Star Treks ended.
Yeah.
Because now they had people in place who were in charge of the aesthetics of those ships and know why they're popular and love them themselves.
Do you revisit the shows at all? Do you still watch them?
Yeah. I'm not watching them every night.
Sure.
I find that generally the way I watch Star Trek now is like my girlfriend, Donna. She's from a different world. As a matter of fact, she grew up in Korea and lived in Seoul until she was like 24 years old. So we don't have a shared childhood.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. And so if I pick out select episodes to show her what Star Trek is all about, she knows how powerful it is. She's seen it for herself now. She's amazed. And so now I show her episodes that are favorites of mine.
Uh-huh.
And that's kind of how I relive it. In a way, it's like if you have a child, you're reliving your childhood by showing them things from when you
right.
Well, I don't have any kids.
Yeah.
So I do it with my girlfriend.
Yeah.
But she actually enjoys it, or she's doing a good job faking it.
And do you find when you watch them now, do you still watch them and see the finished product and the 23rd century and USS Enterprise? Or do you watch them and you see everything that went into making it?
Because, like I mentioned, when I was a kid, I was in love with both sides of the screen.
Yeah.
I was in love with watching the show, and I loved seeing how they did it. And I loved mistakes. I loved resourcefulness when you figure out how they, that they got 4 different toys and put them together to make a prop.
Sure.
I love that, you know. Yeah, it's crazy how much it's permeated everything that I do, you know, even to today. If I would come back, I consider myself semi-retired.
Yeah.
I'm not looking for a job, and I won't take anything I'm not interested in at this point. Here are the shows I would do. One is Legacy. Terry somehow does Legacy. I'm there. Then there's Mike Sussman's Star Trek United.
Yep. Sure.
I'm right there because I know he appreciates, he understands, you know, he's one of us. 3, I would do season 4 of The Orville. And then the other thing that's totally different would be I would do season 3 of 10. You know, 10.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Because it's the Orville art department.
Right.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
And we know how to have fun.
Yeah.
You know, although there's moments of terror.
Oh, I'm sure. I just 2 more questions for you. I obviously can't. I mean, you have designed an Enterprise, so I can't. Oh, wait, 2 of them, but like
3 of them.
But like one hero Enterprise that showed up multiple times an episode for 98 episodes. I want to take you back to that moment where you get told, Doug, this is on you, buddy. You got to make the Enterprise NX-01 and you got to make it a reality. Like in that moment, are you like, my whole life has been leading towards this moment. I'm rested and ready. Tap me in, coach. Or do you just feel this like incredible pressure and stress and fear of you're building an Enterprise?
Yeah. There's a part of me that's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. This is incredible. Yeah. The other part is like shitting a brick. Honestly, I mean, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to, you know, I don't know if I could do this. Because I was a makeup artist. And then I was a graphic designer. And then when Deep Space Nine ended and they were fully stocked over on Voyager, I started thinking about where I might go. And I knew that visual effects had been making the transition to CG, for better or worse. And I knew they were using the light wave for their visual effect shots. And I used to hang out a lot in Mike's office. We'd just talk about Star Trek and stuff like that. And there was a box with the program Lightwave in it. And the box had pictures of spaceships and giant robots fighting. And, you know, like every time I'd be sitting there with Mike, I'd be turning the box over and looking at it, you know. And finally one day, and like Mike and I were able to finish each other's sentences, I would say, hey, Mike, he goes, oh, why don't you take it? You know, I don't want to climb the learning curve. I'm too busy with the 2 shows. Because I was like, are you going to ever? He's like, no, please. So I put it on my computer at work. And when I had spare time, when my work stuff was done for DS9, I'd sit there and do Lightwave.
Yeah. And
then one day I felt someone standing behind me. It was Gary Hutzel, the visual effects supervisor. And he's like this. And he came back a few days later and said, say, could a guy like you make a spaceship in the computer for a guy like me? That's exactly what he said. I'll never forget it. And I'm like, well, yeah, but Gary, I don't have the skills of those guys at Foundation Imaging. And I'll never forget what he said next. He said, I'd rather give someone a chance I actually like working with. And I'm like, okay, as long as you know. And we did a ship. He borrowed me from Mike Okuda for about a week and a half. I was over at MSG. And when we got it done, I remember as he was walking out and I was finished, I said, gee, Gary, that was really fun. I hope we get a chance to do this again. And I remember him saying, be careful what you wish for. And that's when after that.
Do you remember what ship that was?
I can't remember the name of the race. It wasn't a race that we saw a lot of.
It was Deep Space Nine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember. Can't remember what the race was. But after that, he kept after me to try to get, because he didn't go on to Enterprise.
Yeah.
And he was trying to get Battlestar Galactica. Ron Moore was doing it. And so I was kind of consulting a little bit with him. And when he did get the show, he was trying to get me. And I'm like, Gary, it's only like third season on Enterprise. It can go for 7 years. I can't just walk away from 7 years of work.
Yeah.
And he was,
And Les
sad.
Moonves solved that for you.
Was that?
Les Moonves solved that for you.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, he did. Well, you know what? I was sorry about Star Trek, but it was a good thing for me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have to leave Star Trek. Star Trek ended.
Right.
And the thing was that I remember I knew Enterprise was in trouble because there were people in the office with tape measures measuring the office. And I'm going, this is not a good sign.
Yeah, right.
So we found out on the internet it was canceled. They didn't tell us. And I remember driving home thinking, wow, I've really had a good long run. I had the 10 years of doing makeup. That was amazing. And then Star Trek, and I'm probably never going to work again. My luck has been, I'm sure I've used up all my luck. And when I got home, Dorothy met me at the door and she said, Gary Hutzel left a message for you. And I'm like, oh my God, he's going to invite me to Battlestar Galactica. And I got him on the phone and he said, I heard about Enterprise. And I go, yeah. And he says, but you know what? Every cloud has a silver lining. Yeah. He says, I could set you up over at Zoic, which is like Santa Monica or something. And I go, but Gary, couldn't I possibly come there and be with you on stage and stuff? And he says, would you want to do that? And I'm like, hell yes. So I was on board. And I remember after I got off the phone, I told Dorothy, there's some women who I'd have to be away for months.
Yeah.
Some women who might not like that, but Dorothy, she was, go get him, Tiger.
Yeah.
And I remember being on the airplane a couple of days later, going to Vancouver. And I found a note in my carry-on bag, with a snack or something. And it said, have fun storming the castle. So that's how I got on Galactica,
Yeah.
When they were going to do that movie a few years later, I actually offered materials and stuff, but they really weren't interested.
Yeah.
They want to do their own thing. Part of me understands that. The other part is like, you're going against the grain.
Uh-huh.
There's been a lot of good work done, but is it Star Trek? It can't just be a good design. It has to fit. It has to be a puzzle piece that fits perfectly, just like the ships. People want to be able to take those ships apart with their eyes and know what's happening here. I did a video that was on my Facebook page. I have that. Did you see the 6-foot NX that I have?
I did. It's incredible.
It's been amazing.
Yeah.
So Jason, the director, came over and says, I said, you want me to put the uniform on? Because I have one.
Yeah.
And he just videotaped me going around it and talking about all the details, how it works. And Donna saw it. And like I told you, she's still learning. And she's like, I can't believe it. She says, you're like a scientist. You know how everything works. I go, well, I'm not really a scientist, but I do know how everything works. And I have a basic understanding of science. Maybe not like Michael Kuda has, because he's a junior physicist. The great thing about Donna is it gets me outside of this bubble that we're living in, the Star Trek bubble, and see how someone who has no idea about how it's and they have an open mind, and of course they know it makes me happy. So she loves me and everything. So that gives her a kick.
Yeah.
But you're like a scientist.
So tell me about the documentary. Tell me about the Kickstarter. What are you hoping that the documentary ends up being?
Well, I wanted to really look at this side of making television or movies from a point of view that is more under the fingernails. I mean, we tend to get a lot of stuff on the actors and the writers and the producers, but then there are the people who are creating their world building. They're creating that world. And we don't hear hardly anything about that, very little. Sometimes you'll hear more of it on extras on DVDs or whatever, or if they have extra material. You'll see more of that there. I mean, honestly, well, first, I want it to be fun. And it's a memoir, but it's going to lean into Star Trek. I think I've written my memoir. I wrote it more like a Hollywood memoir, not so much Star Trek. Star Trek dominates it.
Sure.
And one day I was at a diner in Burbank called the Talleyrand. A lot of people who work at Disney and stuff go there for lunch. And coming out, I run into this guy who recognizes me, and he's a fan. And so, of course, you hit it off right away. And a few months later, I get a message from him saying, telling me who he is. He's done extra material on discs and stuff for Warner Brothers and the CW and just hundreds of things. And he wants to do a documentary on me. I thought it was ridiculous, frankly. I said, yeah, sure. I go, as a matter of fact, I pretty much have my memoir done. And I gave him a copy of that. So the timing was really kind of perfect. The memoir is going to be published by Jacobs and Brown, who did the Cushman books.
Yep.
I had offers from other publishers, but they weren't genre publishers.
Uh-huh.
And I just felt that Jacobs and Brown would be more important to them.
Yeah. And they know how to reach the Star Trek fans. Yeah.
And they're also great to work with. I've been working with, a few people there, and, I feel like they get it. So that's probably going to be out late spring, I'm guessing. We had a big meeting yesterday, and Mark Cushman had some really good points about structure, which I knew that I needed help with. I'm not a professional writer. I have a style, and so he had some really good points, and I'm going to be implementing some of them over the next couple of weeks. The other thing is that in the period where I'm growing up and doing makeup, I don't touch on Star Trek that much. And he says, find a way to keep Star Trek alive through all of it. And I wasn't treating it like a Star Trek book at first, but I see he's right that the audience is going to be Star Trek fans. And so it's important to lean into it more.
I mean, I think for me, as I hear you talk about your life and your experiences, you have this huge body of work that you've done. But what I see is the kid who caught the last 30 minutes of This Side of Paradise and then decided to go out and make that his life's career, right? That's what I hear. That's what I hear when I hear you talk about it.
That's very gratifying, because that's what I am. It really hasn't changed. I expected it to, but it just never did.
Yeah.
Never fell out of love with it. And it was like a snowball rolling downhill. It just accumulated as it went, and I picked up all kinds of crazy stuff on the way and just let me tell you, this business can be hard. Makeup is really difficult. The hours are unbelievable.
Sure.
I mean,
you hear the actors talk about showing up at 3 a.m., but that means you as the makeup artist have to be there at 2 a.m., right?
Yeah. I mean, well, I put Lal's makeup on.
Yeah.
Remember Lal?
Yep.
And by myself. And I would get in at, 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And you might be there all day. I mean, on Star Trek, you stayed the whole time the crew was there, and you were the last to leave. When we did Dick Tracy, we had to deal with not John Landis, John Landau. He was James Cameron's guy. Went on to be James Cameron's guy. We had this idea about having 3 different teams to do makeup. The A team that comes in and puts the makeup on, the B team that stays with the makeup all day, and the C team cleanup people. That way everyone stays rested.
Yeah.
And we went to Landau, and he said, "Is that how they did it on Planet of the Apes?" And we were like, "No." And he goes, "Well, there's no precedent."
Yeah.
And I never forget Caglione. He goes, "Well, let's make a precedent." He thought about it for a minute. He said, "Okay." And we had 3 teams. And the A team that put the makeups on was fresh. They got enough rest. Star Trek was a much harder job.
Yeah.
But you see, the thing was that I was so in love with Star Trek, it didn't matter. I didn't care. I didn't want to be anywhere else. I wasn't trying to get home. I wanted to be on Star Trek all the time. I lived on the Enterprise D. Lived on it.
Doug, this has been a terrific conversation. Thank you so much. Good luck with the Kickstarter and the documentary and the memoir. I will definitely... I have pledged a bit of money to the Kickstarter, and I'll definitely pick up the memoir when it comes out. But just wanted to say thank you so much, because I mean, I'm a huge Star Trek fan. I'm a little younger than you are. I caught the last 20 minutes of A Matter of Time, the Berlingoff Rasmussen episode of The Next Generation with Matt Frewer, and that was the thing that got me being like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with this, and this is going to be, a thing that I spend a significant amount of my life thinking about and, doing stuff related to. But I made it to the East Coast of America. I didn't make it all the way to the West Coast.
East Coast is pretty cool.
Yeah.
New York City is awesome.
So you've had from that moment, an incredible career of all
really
kinds of Star Trek stuff. And so, congratulations on everything. And I can't wait to hear you share this story with more people through both the memoir and the documentary. Thank
you. Thanks for having me. And, I'll come back anytime.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
You too. Talk soon. Bye-bye. Weekly Trek is a production of TrekCore.com and owned by Trapezoid Media, LLC.